C3, Connecting Coaches Cognition, Coaching with Courtney and Christensen. As a busy coach, you spend all day refueling, revamping, and reflecting with educators. Now's the time to stop and recharge your batteries with some much-needed coaching for the coach.
Welcome back to another episode of C3. I'm Courtney Groskin, and I'm here with
Violet Christensen.
Violet. It's December. What's new in your world?
How is it December? The year just like slips through my fingers. I feel like I'm like, no. You're just in that like madness state of prepping for holidays and wrapping up holidays and just trying to make sure all your things are squared away and really, hit it hard for those last few weeks before a well-deserved break, right? It's funny, you come off a break and you just look to that next one. I think that's part of education, that we always have something to like shoot for and be excited to go to. So just always looking to the next and thinking about what can we actually accomplish in the here and now between this time and that break and so on. And it's just always a fun time with my girls and being able to like see the holiday wonder come out and like they're getting big. So it's like I'm savoring all of these little moments and these little things. Like it was so hilarious. We were trying to come up with a new tradition. The girls wanted a new tradition for Thanksgiving, right? And so I asked them, I said, what tradition do you want, right? And my children are very different. And you've heard a lot about them, wonderful, faithful listeners. And one of them says, I think before dinner, we should go out and look at the stars and make a wish. And it will make our heart feel full. And I'm like, oh, that's a great tradition. Like, let's do that 100%. My other child looks at me and goes, I want to dress up as a turkey. I think that will make everybody happy.
And I can guess which child answered which way.
I know you could name it right now, but yes, it's hilarious. We now have an official turkey robe. I bought it extra big so it can last for multiple years. I'm pretty sure when this child is 18, I'm going to make her still put on that turkey suit and be like, well, this is what you asked for. It's part of our tradition now. So, it's always just a fun time of year, and like being able to try some fun traditions is always cool, and especially with little kids. So, I mean, that was just one funny of like, my heart is full by making a wish, or I want to dress like a turkey.
That explains your children in the best way possible. It just captures them beautifully.
It matches their personalities, and it's just funny. As they grow and develop, and it's very clear the differences. But what is going on in your world in this moment, Miss Courtney?
Just coming off one holiday right into the next. I feel like Thanksgiving being so late this year, December is going to be really fast. It's a great time of year for reflection and really taking a moment to stop and think about all the growth that's happened. And also I'm like, wait, where did the year go? It wasn't just summer yesterday. It's crazy.
It really feels like it. And we kind of had that like long lingering, like I think I got my last rose from the garden not even a week ago. And I'm like, what? Like 2-3 weeks? Like how are they still? I don't know. It's bizarre. Have you gotten anything out of your garden recently, or was it donezo?
I finally had to pull my garden at Halloween. It was still blooming, but I got to the point of like, hey, I need to do a fall cleanup of the yard, and I really can't do that till my garden beds are empty. So I did cut them all and saved a bunch of seeds for next year. So we'll start into the winter planning of what next year's garden's going to look like, because I'm not a cold crop grower. So
there you go. Well, sometimes you just got to be done. But the roses, I'm not supposed to cut back. So, sometimes they just, that miracle just pops up somehow through the cold.
I cut mine back. So definitely no roses here.
No roses there, but still enjoying all of the parts of the season, which is wonderful.
Definitely. Today, we're so lucky to have a returning guest and a brand new guest together. Today, we have Jim Knight. Jim is a founding senior partner at the Instructional Coaching Group and a research associate at the University of Kansas Center for Research on Learning. He has spent more than 2 decades studying professional learning, effective teaching, and instructional coaching. Jim has written several books, and his articles on instructional coaching have been included in publications such as the Journal of Staff Development, Principal Leadership, The School Administrator, and Teachers Teaching Teachers. His direct pathways to success a comprehensive district-wide school reform project in the Topeka, Kansas School District, and leads the Intensive Instructional Coaching Institute and the Teaching and Learning Coaching Annual Conference. We have his co-author, Michael Faggella-Luby. He is a professor of special education and core faculty at the Alice Neeley Special Education Research and Services Institute at Texas Christian University. He's also a past president of the Division of Learning Disabilities and of the Council of Exceptional Children and an associate editor for the Journal of Learning Disabilities. His primary research embeds cognitive learning strategies into the subject areas, courses to improve reading comprehension for all levels of learners. He has received 2 national awards for his research, has written 59 scholarly publications, and has presented 90 sessions at national or international conferences. Welcome, Jim and Michael.
Right. Gentlemen, we are so excited to have you today on C3 and Connecting Coaches Cognition. And we always love when we have a double whammy of 2 amazing guests at one time to share their cognition with us and their thinking. Can Michael and Jim, will you please just start us off and frame us up for our conversation here by explaining where data lives within your impact cycle and just be able to give us some grounding?
Sure. Michael and I have kind of divided up the questions. So I'll start, but then Michael, you just dive in. So the impact cycle is kind of a universal model for change, and it's a product of about 10 years of careful study. We were working with schools in Oregon and then in Washington State where they were trying out the coaching cycle. And then it became a book, The Impact Cycle. And the idea is there's 3 parts: identify, learn, and improve. Maybe I'll talk about those parts really quickly first and then say how data fits in. So in the identify stage, you're identifying where you are and where you want to get to and how you're going to get there. And so in the classroom, that would mean, where are my students now? Where do I want them to get to? How are they going to get there? And then once you've identified the goal, and you've identified how you're going to get there, then in the learning stage, you help the person get ready to implement whatever it is they're going to do to help them get to that goal. That probably is going to involve some precise explanations, maybe even checklists and modeling or co-teaching or some way in which they can hear about it and see it. And then they try it out and it's probably not going to work. And they're going to have to make some adaptations, some modifications. It's never really quite simple. So in the improvement stage, they try things out. It's got to be modified. So in order to make that work, data is a really, really important piece, because data is, first off, how you see what's happening. You know, data, we like to say, and a lot of people have said this, Bruce Wellman is the first person I heard say it, but that data makes the invisible visible. So you can see things you wouldn't ordinarily see if you start to look for emotional engagement or cognitive engagement or whatever it might be. And then once you're able to see things, then you set a goal. So data provides a way of measuring the goal. And then once you start to implement, then the data monitors progress and tell you if it's working or it's not working. It's like a GPS. It tells you if you're on track or off track. So data is, along with knowing effective strategies and having a coaching cycle, it's an integral part of the whole impact cycle. You probably can't do the impact cycle unless you see where you are, unless you can set a goal, and unless you can monitor progress. And that's what data helps happen within that sort of universal cycle for change.
Yeah, thank you for laying that out so clearly for us. I think using data as a third point is really important as part of that coaching cycle of having those measures to know where we're starting and then are we being effective with the change that we're making. What are some effective strategies you recommend for creating a positive and constructive dialogue around data in schools, especially in cases where the data might initially seem discouraging to teachers?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the first things we always start off with is the idea that you've probably heard this before. The data are the data. They're not good data. They're not bad data. But hopefully you have been able to, and this is something we try and underscore in the book, is that you have the right alignment between the variables that you're interested in studying and the data you're able to collect, right? That's the important part, that you've got this reliable and valid process that's speaking to the impact cycle, that you've got these pieces identified. For me, data is always telling us 2 things. One is about student learning, right? That's ultimately, I think you'll see as a focus in our work, that we try and put that student first. And in doing so, it means the second piece is in play, which is being in service to teachers so that they can better understand, are the instructional decisions that they're making matching the learning needs that the students have? There's 10 rules that we talk about in the book, data rules. And among those, some that are particularly relevant to this question, right, is thinking about, from a strategy perspective, is the data in some way tied to professional learning? Is it that we can make mistakes in our school, that as teachers, we recognize nobody's perfect, both teachers and students and administrators, right? Like the whole team has to realize there's got to be room for growth. And if the data is showing us that we can change things, growth mindset, we then have more investment in removing some of that threat from the data. We also really like, and Jim has sort of championed this for a long time, but data that's chosen by the teacher and then is gathered by the teacher so that it's happening at the right, what we would call in the research community, the right unit of analysis. It's what makes it less scary. It makes it less threatening. And that becomes the strategy for constructive dialogue because I've collected it. I know where the data came from and I got to be a part of that. And then of course, what are you trying to collect? When we were writing this book, we could have gone in a lot of different directions. But one of the things we agreed on very early on was let's collect data that's objective. And there's real value in the subjective, of course. But in our case, we were interested in some of the objective data, teacher talk versus student talk, the amount of engagement as measured by student opportunities to respond in a given period of time. I'm asking some questions as a teacher, but what level of questioning am I asking? If I want higher order thinking from students, I've got to provide the opportunity to answer that kind of question. And that kind of objective data is it's like a mirror, right? It just shows us what we're doing in a non-evaluative way. Then now I can decide, is that getting me the outcome that I want, or do I need to maybe back up and try something else? And maybe the last thing I'll put in there, and I thought maybe this is a hallmark of the coaching world, is the data should be analyzed by a group, right? More heads are better than one because we bring our own paradigms and our experiences to it. And so now maybe we see things in the patterns of the data that maybe somebody else doesn't, especially if the growth isn't happening at the rate you'd like it to. That could be frustrating. What a great opportunity for a coach to give a different perspective, ask a different question to show you where the work is paying off. That's sort of how I'd start my strategies.
It's so powerful when the teachers choose their data, so therefore they have less vulnerability in that. And if we can all come together as a team in order to own our data together and have that shared vulnerability, that's sometimes in coaching where I've seen the biggest obvious, like as a whole team, just elevating their game when you can actually own that in that fair and open and respectful way with one another.
Absolutely.
Tell us. I know you gave us a snippet, but in data rules, you discuss using data as a tool to elevate teaching. And we have seen that. I think everyone who's in that coaching world understands that data is so valuable, and being able to have that quantitative and not just bringing our perspective in can be so huge. Could you share a specific example where that data led to a transformative change in a classroom or a school or with a team?
Yeah. And I want to say that it's important. I think we're not doing the elevation, if you want to use those words, to the teacher. We're creating the conditions for the teacher to focus on what they want to focus on. And that's a big difference. It's not something, as we would describe coaching, it's not something where we're going to make the teacher do this thing. We're helping them go after whatever it is they want to go after. And so data is really important. If I was trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, I would be keeping track of probably my weight and my speed, and that data would help me figure out how well I'm doing. Now, right now, I probably couldn't do the Boston 5K, but I'd still want to gather data if that's what I was going to try to do. It would help me figure it out. So we had a project in Othello, Washington. I wrote about this in the book, The Definitive Guide to Instructional Coaching. And there's a coach and teacher there, JC and Marcy. And JC was a really masterful math teacher. She came from a whole line of teachers. Like her mom was a kindergarten teacher for 33 years or something. Her grandmother was a teacher. Her sister was a teacher. So nobody was surprised that she was a teacher. And she was great at math. But when I interviewed her, she said, I had no idea what to do about writing. So I went to the coach and I said, can you help me with this writing? And she got together with the coach, Marcy, and they unpacked the standards. They figured out what the kids needed to be able to do. And then together they constructed a single point rubric or a checklist of what a good paragraph should look like. They said, these are the elements that need to be in this paragraph. Now, the coaching could be focused on different kinds of engagement data or achievement data, but they talked through what needed to happen and they created this checklist. Then they taught the kids how to use the checklist to assess their own writing, second graders. And they were able to monitor, was it working or not working? And over time, they had to make a lot of changes. They adjusted the checklist. They used learning maps as one of their teaching strategies. The rubric became part of their teaching. They use that rubric as a check for understanding. Some people might not call it a checklist or rubric, but we'll call it, it's in the family of rubrics, is what Susan Brookhart says. And that checklist became a kind of way in which they could see if they were on track or off track. It was the GPS for their learning. Now, it was the checklist that JC, the teacher, created, and it was because she wanted to focus on this. And what Marcy did is she helped her unwrap the standards, but the checklist became the focus for instruction. And then they kept trying to make adjustments along the way. Eventually, they hit the goal, which was that 80% of the kids could get 5 out of 5 on the rubric 3 times in a row. And I've got a video I show in workshops where JC says, essentially, I didn't leave anybody behind. They weren't the forgotten, because she felt like every kid had succeeded and she hadn't left any kid behind because the data helped her see every student. And she says, next year, this is what I'm going to do. So it wasn't just this year, but it was about planning for next year. So the thousands of examples of that where data is just a way of measuring where we are, where we want to get to, keeping track of what's working, making adjustments, and then eventually being the point of conversation for celebrating success. And it's pretty cool to watch the video when JC and Marcy talk about the fact that they finally hit the goal.
Thank you for sharing that story. It just talks about educators work so hard, but how do we know where to put that effort? And then are we seeing the results we want to see? And then how big the payoff is when you can sit there and look at the numbers and say, I didn't leave any student behind because I was continually adjusting and meeting them where they were.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing, Courtney, and that is that I think, you really need to be able to make the case of the impact that coaching can have. And it can't just be, I kind of feel like it's a good thing, or I'm sure it's making a difference. You need to draw a direct line between what the coach does and the impact the coach has. And so if you document through the use of data effectively, data that the teacher's involved in developing, document the goals that have been set and hit, you can say, this is exactly what the coach did. This is exactly the impact we had on kids. And when you focus on data, you put the emphasis where it needs to be. It's not on, did we do all the things on the checklist? It's did we have a significant difference in the quality of what happens to kids in the classroom? It shows you exactly what the coach does. And when you start to document it, it becomes pretty compelling to say, we really need to keep this person around in this position.
See, to all of our coaches, that's the importance of having a coaching log that you might dislike filling it out, but that's where all that data can live. And then you can step back and see the payoff there.
Yeah, the big thing, though, I think, is the student focus goal, what we call a peers goal, that they're documenting exactly how many goals they set and how many goals that were hit and what changed. Because then you can say, well, the engagement was like this. Now it's like this. Kids were writing like this. Now they're writing like this. And when you compile all that information, what goals were set and hit, that's when you can really document it. But it is really helpful to keep track of how you use your time, because that tells you, essentially, that becomes like a GPS for your coaching. Because if you're only spending 10% of your time on coaching, you can't expect to have very big results.
Definitely. You emphasize the importance of understanding the big data versus small data in education. Can you explain how teachers can balance these two types to better support individual student needs?
Sure. Yeah. Most people don't want to talk about data, period. We're going to talk about big data and small data, right? But I think, there's a lot of ways that you can conceptualize data. For us, maybe big data, teachers are most familiar with the misuse of things like standardized assessments, determining teacher quality, right? That happens all the time, that we use a measure that's validated for one purpose, in this case, a macro measure, a really big measure. But we're using it for something it's not intended to be used for, right? And that compromises the integrity of that measure. So for us, thinking about big data, I mean, what there is some purpose there, right? It can tell us who is consistently benefiting over time from instructional decisions and curriculum, and maybe who's not, maybe who as a group or a targeted area of students that are not benefiting and have been marginalized in some way. So now, okay, now we'll follow up with that, right? Big data has a big view, and that's important view. But for us, I think really the sweet spot of the book is this idea of the small data, the idea that we can invite teachers to think about in the context of the impact cycle, right? Jim's talked already about sort of identify and learn and improve, but we put that now in the context of teachers identifying what is the data they want to collect in the areas. In the book, we talk about different engagement measures, different achievement measures, different teaching measures, all these different things we can collect data on. And then that data helps guide their own learning and improvement. We do it when we collect that data frequently. We do it when we review that data frequently. And we do that when we use it to guide our instructional decisions frequently. And so this allows sort of those micro changes that, when they're in place, likely lead to the big data impact, right? Without the small changes, without changing the large variables, right? We sort of can't think about changing big things if we don't think about the day-to-day and what teachers can do in their classrooms to actually impact that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question. Small data can make a big difference. It's kind of where I put it. And it can make a lasting difference in how people teach. You know, JC, in that little story I told, she was a different teacher next year and the year after and the year after. But her students, who couldn't write a paragraph when they started but could write one afterward, they were different too. They had a lasting impact. So small data can have a big impact.
I was going to say the same thing after Michael finished. It has a large impact, but it also has a lot of opportunities for celebration and to celebrate those successes, both as coaches, educators, and students, that we can show that success, and then they're propelled forward to want to continue to find that success. So it's powerful when you can share that data with students as well, and that they can get to the level of owning it themselves too.
Yeah, it helps us out because, I mean, teachers every day are giving us their best, right? They're giving their kids the best. But to see that long-term payoff takes a really long time. You have to keep showing up every day. So it's nice with these sort of these small variables to be able to say, I invested in whether or not the students are getting enough time to talk in class. Are they answering a certain number of questions? Oh, well, they are. In this amount of time, I really was able to shape that. Now, as I get ready for this quiz this week or this test this week, I really feel like they're in a different place. Oh, they are. Right? That's what's happening in that frequent review of the data.
Absolutely. And for some of our newest educators, because we always have new coaches, new educators coming into the field, can you try to give us just a little bit of a picture of if they're new to data-driven instruction and they're still trying to figure out their best practices within their instruction, what are some practical first steps that they can take to start incorporating the data insights into their teaching practice? Like, what can they take forward tomorrow with them that you could share?
You know, I don't really feel like I'm an expert on data-driven instruction. I think there's some really great books on this. Brian Goodwin's books about this, Tom Guskey, Nancy Love's book on data coaching, who talk about data-driven instruction. But what I think data can help you do is set important, powerful goals and then move towards those goals. And so we break it down into kind of either it's going to be engagement or achievement. Not everybody's that hot on engagement. They're like, really, all I care about is, do the kids learn or not? I'll hear that from experts. But to me, the literature is pretty clear. The reason why kids drop out is because they're not engaged. And I don't know how you can learn if you don't open the book. I mean, you have to be engaged to learn. So we break engagement down into 3 categories. And Mike did all the research on helping us identify what's the data evidence for support of this data. And in the book, you can download lit searches that Mike did with his colleagues to look at the evidence in support of these things. But in engagement, we talk about behavioral engagement. Do the kids look like they're learning? Cognitive engagement. Are the kids getting out of the learning what they should get out of it? And emotional engagement. Do the kids feel like they're safe? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel hopeful? They have a connection with the school, or they're having positive experiences. And then we broke down different ways you can measure all those things, sometimes multiple ways of gathering that engagement data. But I would say too that all data is imperfect. Nothing's perfect. So when you gather cognitive and data, you have to ask the kids, and they might give you a kind of a biased answer. When you gather behavioral and data, you're looking at the students, and your interpretation might not be. Kid might be composing the world's best topic sentence, or he might be thinking, "Wouldn't it be cool if Taylor Swift moved in next door?" We don't know what the kid's thinking, you know. So all data is a little imperfect. And then for achievement, it comes down to the level of learning we want. You know, you could use Bloom or Solo or any number of different ways. We just talk about knowledge, skills, and big ideas. And then what kind of learning do we want? Do we want acquisition, or do we want transfer, or do we want consolidation or connection? And then how do we assess it? And we list off a whole bunch of different things, show people how to use. It could be selected response or brief constructed responses. It could be a rubric. It could be interviewing the kids. And you try to match your assessment methodology to the kind and level of learning you want to see. And that clarity around what it is I'm trying to accomplish, it's kind of sort of like a finish line for the coaching, but it also helps people see, oh, I really want, like, for example, JC, I really want to work on this learning.
Yeah, I think people having a clear target on what they want to work on and then what that might look like is really important, because there's a lot of different areas we can focus our time on. So it really helps narrow that field. We have a large AI initiative happening in St. Vereen. So we're curious, what role do you see for AI in the future of data-informed teaching? And do you think AI can meaningfully enhance how coaches and teachers are interpreting and acting on that data?
Yeah, I love this question. If you were to have asked me 5 years ago what I knew about AI, or whether that was going to impact my life as a teacher and a scholar, I probably would have thought you were crazy. But now, I tell people all the time, before Skynet comes for us, it's going to have maybe some uses that could really help us in teaching in classrooms. And so far, AI models, as much as we hear about them, they don't do a lot that exceeds the user. It's good for specific tasks. And if we can align those, they can be really helpful. I have 2 different AI projects right now. One is funded by the National Science Foundation, and we're doing some really incredible things where we can use the AI and its ability to remember lots and lots of different variables, right? And so we have adults with disabilities who've graduated their 18 to 21-year-old programs, and their vision, just like every 18 to 21-year-old, is they want a certain job, right? Well, we're able to take the characteristics of the learner, match them to the requirements of the job, and then using the AI, suggest evidence-based practices for our transition specialists to work with the kids to move them toward that goal. And also, because AI is bigger than we are in terms of its memory, right? We can begin to identify, yes, the job you want has 9 characteristics that you have to work towards, and you've got 2 of them. But did you know this job over here, you already have 7 of the 8 characteristics? We could actually give you this one intervention, work on this one skill, and you could be competitively employed while you continue to work towards your dream. The second project we have is called Project Classify, and this one is directly related to our work. The gift of AI is that, for good or for bad, it doesn't get tired, right? So one of the things we're doing is some pioneering work and looking at observing classrooms with just audio files and looking at the variables. Some of them we talked about in the book: teacher talk versus student talk, opportunities to respond, use of time in instruction, those levels of question that Jim was just talking about. And it's pretty amazing because the analysis gives us, we do it visually, right? So they've got pie charts and they've got bar graphs. But what it means from a non-evaluative reflective component is teachers can take an audio file. And my dream for this was that a teacher after Friday afternoon would take these files and they'd put them in the computer and they'd shut off the light and they'd go home. And maybe Sunday afternoon, when you're going to plan for the next week, they'd see if the computer was done analyzing them. Well, right now, an hour of audio takes about 3 minutes to analyze. So they can close the light, turn it right back on Friday afternoon. But, it gives them this sense of it's of course never going to replace teaching. It's never going to replace coaching. But what it does is it then gives us something that we could actually say, hey, last week, this is a reflection of where I was. Can I make some decisions about it? And that's sort of the beginning of 2 different AI projects that I think add to a very humanistic, student-centered focus that gets them where they want to go before we run into big trouble.
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about AI. I think there's a lot it can do. And there's parts that I, at this point, don't see it can do. I mean, think about how much it's evolved in just 6 months. So we don't know where it'll be in a couple of years. But I think of, and I'm mostly talking about ChatGPT 4.0, but it's kind of, to me, ChatGPT is kind of like your really smart uncle who likes to drink a bit, and he's going to say to you, whatever you ask him a question, he'll have an answer. It could be helpful, it might not be helpful, but still, you're going to go ask him and see what he's got to say. And so you can go to ChatGPT right now and say, hey, I have these kind of kids. What would be a good peers goal using the peers acronym? And they'll say, well, a good peers goal, would it be powerful, easy, emotionally compelling? And then it'll give you some suggestions that may or may not be helpful. They may be too simplistic. And I actually think the place where the human element is going to be most important is in data. Because I think the data, there's some things you can gather by listening to recording, but there's a lot of things that it's going to be more helpful to have a coach help you with that information. And you can even go to ChatGPT and say, okay, I have 3 different groups of students I'm struggling with. I've got some kids who know more than one language, but they're not really good at English. I got some kids who are high functioning autistic, and I've got some kids who are doing really well. I got a couple kids who I'm not really pleased about the things they're doing with video games at home. They're coming home talking about, this is my class. What do you think I could do? And it'll give you some suggestions. It'll say, well, you could try this, and what about this for a goal? And then you can say, well, I like that strategy you just said. Can you create a checklist for that strategy? Yeah, here's a checklist. So you can use the impact cycle, and within the impact cycle, AI can really help you with a lot of the information. And it doesn't really know really well exactly what a peers goal is. It'll give you an answer, but it may not be perfect. It doesn't really understand in great detail how to do some things, like, say, success criteria, what makes for good success criteria. But if you said, I want to do gradual release, can you create a checklist for gradual release? It's going to pump out a checklist. It's better than nothing. It's a starting point. So I think it has enormous potential in terms of what it can do. And I think there's just some things where it lacks sophistication at this point. Wouldn't it be, I'm sure it'll get to the point where you can upload a video within a couple of years and it'll give you a really good readout on all kinds of things, and especially if you have recordings at every kid's desk and you can hear what the kids are saying. So there's enormous potential, but I don't want to overstate how powerful it can be, because it like, I've tried to be coached by it. I've said, okay, coach me. I sat down with Art Costa and Barb Garmston a couple of weeks ago because they got this big award from our conference, the Don Deschler Leadership Award. And I said, coach me in the method of cognitive coaching used by Art Costa and Barb Garmston. And it started to ask me kind of cognitive coaching type. Their eyes just lit up. But then it became very quickly giving me advice. Well, I think you should do this. So it stopped being a coach pretty quickly and jumped into being more like that drunken uncle I talked about. So
that consulting came in really quick with the AI.
Yeah, it was pretty quickly to advice giving. Yeah.
It's beautiful to hear you speak of beautiful ways to use AI. I think some educators have gravitated so far to it and some are just still very trepidatious. So it's fun to hear those student-centered examples. So I appreciate those from you. And we're going to kind of switch to our rapid fire. I know we've gotten here from you before, Jim, but we want to make sure to share with all of our new listeners of where can we learn more from and with you? What are your handles? What are your best modes of being able to have our listeners reach out to you?
Okay. If you want to just a list, is that helpful? Is that, sorry. Yeah. Rapid fire. So Michael Faggella-Luby, the important part there is it has 2 G's. It has 2 G's. So if you're looking, you'll find there aren't many. There's only 4 of us Faggella-Lubys in the world. So if you find one of us, you've found all 4 of us. But I use @strategicdoc on both Instagram and other social media platforms. On LinkedIn, you can find me by my last name, and at the Learning Research Network.org as well.
And then I would say it's Jim999 on Instagram and on Twitter. And the website to go to is instructionalcoaching.com. There are hundreds of free resources on the website. And email is jim@instructionalcoaching.com. I may not answer. Somebody will answer it, though. So that's the way to make that work.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And if you can give us one more snippet of what does coaching mean to you, or what is one inspirational sentiment that you can kind of leave with our coaches to end our episode?
Yeah, I would say, and then also I should tell you that I have a podcast on all the places, so long as all the places is Spotify and iTunes. And so it's Coaching Conversations with Jim Knight. But I like Sir John Whitmore's definition, I think, is that coaching, and I'm not going to say it exactly the way he does, but coaching is about helping people unleash their potential. And to me, I think that's a good way of putting it. I would say coaching is also about keeping kids first, doing what's best for kids. And so having an unmistakably positive impact on the lives of kids. Our motivating comment is excellent instruction every day in every class for every student everywhere. And until we hit that goal, we're going to keep going. So that's kind of the driving force behind what we do. But I think unleashing potential, I think he's onto something there with that definition.
When I think about coaching, I of course immediately think back to my sports coaches that I had throughout life, right? That's really the first place I think a lot of people encounter coaching. And one of my great, I don't know if it's a fear or it's a trepidation, is I don't like when people feel alone. And I feel like frequently teachers in classrooms who are doing their very best every day, sometimes they feel alone. And the thing about a coach is that they're saying, I am right there with you in all those inspirational ways that Jim has just underscored. And by being right there with you, and I think this is part of the model too, right? I'm not going to be there with you telling you what to do, but by being there with you and maybe through some questions, helping you be the very best of who you can be. That to me is what a coach can do, and why I find it so inspirational.
Walking side by side with an educator and always keeping that same mindset together of where we're trying to go and what we're trying to work on is it's a beautiful thing to have that support. No one wants to feel alone. I like it. We are so thankful for your time and energy. Is there anything that you haven't shared that you want to share with us or send out to the C3 listeners?
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your interest in the book. It's always wonderful to see Jim and get a chance to talk to Jim and now you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to say this. Michael had the patience of Job. We've been talking about this book for like 12 years, and there's got to be one or two times where he said, dude, are you ever going to get around to writing this book? But he stuck with me. To use your metaphor, he walked along with me through the process. So I'm always grateful for Michael's patience. So,
well, we appreciate having you both and being able to share you with our listeners. And we just hope to keep you in our PLN and just continue to be growing as coaches with you. So thank you.
It was a
thank
pleasure.
You both.
We appreciate Jim and Michael doing such a good job sharing some insight on their latest book. Remember, small data can make a big impact and a lasting impression on the way people teach. How might you use data in your coaching or your classroom? Thanks for listening to another episode of C3. Be sure to follow us on social media. C3, connecting, coaches, cognition. Whose thinking will you mediate today?